Hello and welcome to the Off Ramp Project. I'm Carla McLaren and I'm here with the amazing Dr. Janja Lalich, PhD. Janja Lalich is an internationally renowned cult expert, and I feel like there's it's a good time to talk to her about what's going on. Janja wrote the book Bounded Choice, which is about true believers in charismatic cults. She also wrote the classic Take Back Your Life. I think there's a different cover now, right, Janja?
There's a third edition now that came
Third
out
edition.
2 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is about how do you recover from having been in a cult? One of the nice things that I learned from Yanya is that abusive relationships are also cultic. So when you think, there's a cult and these people are weirdos, maybe they're not. Maybe they're a lot like people you know who are in a bad relationship. And then Yanya and I worked together on
Yay.
this book, yay, Escaping Utopia, which is about was it 65 kids?
65 or 68.
65, yeah, kids who grew up in cults, so it was all they knew, and they got out. And for me, this is one of the most important things to realize. People leave cults every day. They are very powerful social structures, but people leave, even kids who haven't been to school, who didn't have a driver's license, who didn't know how to get a job, they left. And so I think at this point in season one, I talked about the cultic nature of what's going on in the United States and other countries as people are shifting far rightward and very authoritarian. And one of the things I've noticed, and the reason I wanted to talk to Yanya, is that a lot of people, my friends on the left, who are good, strong, loving people, you'd love to have them over. They bring cheese. They're great people.
They bring
They,
hummus.
and then hummus. Um, just warm, intelligent, educated, loving people are looking at what's going on in the right, and they cannot believe their eyes. They don't know what to do. And many of them I'm seeing have been posting things about people on the right being, I don't know what I would say, sort of evil, right? And one of the things I talked about that makes something cultic is you make enemies. One of the ways to close up a, a community, close up a group, is to make enemies outside. So you all have to protect each other. It's certainly been done to people on the left, right? And now the people on the left are sort of like, oh yeah. And to me, this looks like watching a car crash in slow motion. It's like, this is not going to get better.
Right.
Yanya and I were both in cults. Who were your enemies in the cult you were in? Who were you taught to dehumanize or think of as?
Well, I was in a political cult. I was in a left-wing revolutionary Marxist-Leninist, um, very closed group during the 70s and 80s. And um, I would say our primary enemy were other people on the left.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
yeah, no, that's who we despise. We said they were petty bourgeois and they were going to undermine the revolution, and we shouldn't trust them, and we shouldn't count on them. And we wrote leaflets about them and pamphlets and booklets, and um, so we trashed their offices. I mean, we would do things like we would be in a coalition for a demonstration about something, like say it was against Khomeini back then, or it was, whatever. And we would say, well, we'll make the posters, because we had a print shop. It was one of the ways we earned money. But and then we would leave their names off the posters for the for the, for the demonstrations, as though we were like the only sponsors. I mean, it was just awful. And so yeah, that was our worst enemy. And it was pretty stupid, because in order to, realistically, if you're going to have a revolution, you have to have as many people as you can possibly get. I mean, why are we doing no King's Days all over the country, right?
Yeah.
The more, the better, so that we can eventually man the barricades if we want to go fully on task. So to alienate the other people who have left or liberal ideas was completely ridiculous. I mean, we also criticized the government and, whoever, but we spent a lot of time criticizing the left.
That hasn't stopped. The
No,
left is very, very hard. We're hard on each other.
yeah,
And
the
especially
tyranny.
around language
Mhm.
and how you present yourself in the world. It's
Yeah, and
hard to be on the left.
which guru you follow. Like, are you
Yeah,
Maoist, or are you Rush-aligners, or are you for Venezuela when they had a socialist leader? Like, so
yeah.
all of, and our claim was that we didn't follow anybody. We were American socialists, which was also absolutely bullshit, because we read Chairman Mao morning, noon, and night, and we memorized the little red book. So, so, and anybody who was in San Francisco back then will remember there was a China bookstore.
Mhm.
So we could go in and, those wonderful Chinese posters from the Chinese Revolution of people working in the fields and the happy workers marching, all our houses were decorated with those, but oh no, we weren't Maoists.
It's so funny. In
Yeah.
in in our culture, we didn't want to be around anybody who didn't believe in us. And
Oh,
a lot of our beliefs were goofy. I'm sorry they were. Um, in reincarnation, and that we had all reincarnated together, and that we had been in Camelot, which doesn't exist, but we were there.
well,
Um,
that's like the
but
guy. Oh,
yeah, because it was a new age community, a group, and there was a lot of belief about negative energy.
mhm.
So that if people didn't believe you, they were actually going to stop you from being able to create, we were going to create this wonderful place. And I talked in the first series of the Off Ramp Project, we had a cult leader who wasn't very good at it. He wasn't toxic enough to
Ah,
really ever become a cult leader. But what I noticed, and this is something I learned from your work, is it was the cadre below him that were trying to create the cult, and they were all from Est.
oh,
Est was a 70s cult
oh,
of
absolutely.
what would you say,
Self-improvement.
self-awareness. It became the forum. No, it became
Not
Life
yet.
Springs, and then it became the forum.
No, LifeSpring was a separate outfit.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Est became Landmark Forum.
Landmark Forum. Are they
Yeah.
still
Oh,
in
yes.
business?
Oh, yes, yes,
Oh my
yes. Very
goodness.
big, very big.
Oh, wow.
Mhm.
Hey, people, we knew where it started. It's not good. Okay, it's not going anywhere good. I thought Life Springs and Est were like it was kind of a granddaughter of
Well,
Est.
no, they were competitors, It was
Oh,
they started LifeSpring Est and another one called Psy World, PSI, Psy World.
yeah,
I did a book with Dr. Margaret Singer,
yeah.
who was the preeminent cult person back in the 80s and 90s. And we did a book called Cults in Our Midst. And we have a whole chapter called Cults in the Workplace. And we talk about those three, the origins and how that came about. So if anyone's interested in that, I believe that book is still available, Cults in Our Midst.
Yeah. No, that is very helpful.
And
Something
of
I
course,
was thinking. Go
there's
ahead.
dozens of those groups still happening. They're called large group awareness trainings. That's
Yes.
what we call them, LGOTs, and they're everywhere. They're in the business world like crazy. They're in the government. They're everywhere. You know,
Yeah, I was doing some business consulting for a while, wrote a book about it, and what I found was that these awareness trainings had been happening one after another. And so when I would get to the consulting room with people, there would be a lot of what is she going to make us do?
Mhm.
Like they flew through there like I don't know, poop through a goose. And I ended up, kind of stopping my consulting because I couldn't go in fresh and clean and be a person. There was a lot of very necessary suspicion
Oh yeah.
about who the heck I was and what I was doing there. So thanks, y'all. Thanks so much. You ruined my career. Something that you've said in your books is that one of the most important things that attracts people to cults and abusive relationships and other groups like that isn't that they're ignorant, it's that they're idealistic.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. If there's any common denominator, that's what it is. It's idealism. It's people who want a better world, they want a better church, they want a better life, they want more money, they want a better school for want of, a better community. And so that's generally the motivating factor, although it's also important that about 2/3 of people who end up in these groups get recruited by a friend, a family member, or a coworker.
Okay.
So that's
So
that.
it feels like a natural part of their life,
Yeah,
their social life.
it's somebody right? It's your uncle inviting you to a landmark workshop, right? Or it's
Yeah.
your sister inviting you to see some guru who's only going to be in town this week and he's going to lift off a chair and all this yellow light is going to, it's like whatever it is.
Yeah.
Um, and usually they invite you so many times that you finally say, okay, I'll go, just to get them off your back. But once you take that first step, if the group is good at what it does, they're going to get you to agree to come to the next thing and the next thing. And boom, before you know it, you've signed your life away.
I also noticed for me anyway is that part of the thing that was so interesting about the cult was I could be special.
Mm.
Not just idealistic, but I could be
Oh, yeah.
special and a
No,
part of a special group.
yeah, no, that sense of elitism is definitely, once you're in, then that's one of the hooks,
Yeah.
right? Like
And that I could make a difference.
yeah, you are the only ones who can do this, right? But
Yeah.
but only if you stick with this particular leader.
Yeah, only if you do it this way.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think the reason I'm looking at the American movements of MAGA, which is Make America Great Again, and QAnon, which is I have no idea.
And I don't think anyone did.
I don't think anybody knows. But both of them create monsters on the outside, monsters everywhere, pedophiles who eat children.
Hillary
It's,
Clinton in the pizza parlor basement.
yeah, it's a terrifying world that they create outside of themselves,
Hmm.
in which that's an excellent way to get people to stay with you.
Yeah. Well, fear is one of the big motivators for sure.
It's like it's super paranoia. It's
Right.
it's like creating terror and panic
Hmm.
that those people are coming to get you.
Right.
Yeah.
And you forgot the anti-vaxxers.
Oh yeah.
Or do you lump them in with QAnon? I mean, that kind of happened all at the same
They're
time.
kind of QAnon MAGA anti-vax. Now I grew up in the early anti-vaccine world,
Mhm.
of the early kind of 70s new age health food
Right. Eastern
alternative
medicine.
medicine people.
Right.
And they didn't think about autism at that time. Of course, we know that there's no connection between vaccines and autism. Autism has been with us since the beginning. Humans were humans.
According to our head of human health, whatever his name is, a horrible person who's destroying the Kennedy reputation.
I mean, he's just picking that up from,
Yeah.
from the zeitgeist.
Yeah. Yeah.
He may or may not believe it, but it's definitely a way
Well,
to,
his own kids are vaccinated, so I
yeah,
think that tells
it's
you.
definitely a way to signal to others
Right.
that you're a part of the in crowd.
Right.
There's something I was thinking when I was in my cult, I didn't know anybody in the outside who had the savvy to be able to talk to me in a way that I could hear. They could talk to me in a way that made me double down and triple down on being in the cult because they were like, Carla, how can you be so stupid? This,
Mhm.
do you know what I mean? It's like they were tearing me down, and the only thing that could build me back up was the cult. So I'm not leaving that. I eventually did leave, but was there anybody in your life when you were in that intense cult who could talk to you in a way that wasn't going to throw you back in? Did anybody figure out a way to talk to you?
I don't think anyone, well, as far as I remember, nobody tried. I mean,
Okay.
my family was on the other side of the country. eventually my my brother knew I was a quote dirty communist, and that's about all, and he would like just sneer at me. Um, my friends who I was not able to recruit, who lived in San Francisco, I basically never saw them. I mean, we didn't have free time. The only free time you had was if you sent in a report and said, I'd like Tuesday night off because I want to go try to recruit Bob and Alice.
Yeah.
And then you would be given a few hours off to go do that. Now, I used to make up shit like that just to get some time off, but I had no intention of recruiting Bob and Alice. I just like hanging out at their house for a night.
Yeah.
But so and the really sad for me, the sad thing, and I know you know the story, but the the whole story about my mother and what happened in the cult, which I can't get into the whole story.
Mhm.
People can buy my memoir when it's out. In
Coming soon.
yes, we hope. But my mother was my mother came to live with me, or was brought to live with me at some point. She was very ill, and I would leave and go to work every day. And but when I came home, she was already asleep because we worked like 20-hour days. And the I left one evening and leaned over to kiss her in the rocking chair, and she said, "Oh, honey, I'm so proud of you. You're doing such good work for the people." And even then I thought to myself, "Oh, if you only knew." And that night she died. I came home and found her dead, and it was like just devastating. Those were the last words she said to me, which in a way I'm glad that she didn't know that I was being so abused and brainwashed and messed up. But yeah, so I didn't really have anybody. um I know certainly other people did, and the classic example, like your own, is that people would say, "What are you doing in that crazy group?"
Yeah.
And that's not helpful at all.
No, no. There were people, they didn't talk to me about it. Yeah, there were people who just didn't talk about it, but they maintained their relationship with me.
Yeah,
And that gave me a way out.
yes,
That,
that's what I advise people to do
yeah,
with cults anyway. It's a little different with MAGA and QAnon and stuff, but or the right wing group, the super, right wing racist groups. But with the cults, you're sort of run of the mill cults.
yeah,
What I always advise families, like, just try to do things. Don't talk about the cult, don't talk about the leader. Just try to if you have contact with the person at all, like, just do things you used to do together to have fun, like go fishing or whatever.
yeah,
And don't just try to get them to remember that there actually were good times before they joined this group and got so isolated. At Christmas time, send them their favorite cookies, whatever. What I always say is, you want to tug at the emotional heartstrings, right? You want to try to awaken what they knew from before, that they were told to, was awful, and now they're saying, well, maybe it wasn't so awful. um,
yeah. I think the same with people who are in abusive relationships. If you
yeah,
say, look, your girlfriend is not a good person, they
yeah,
are going to shut you out.
right,
That's
right,
not, that's not how you do it. You just keep, it requires a lot of patience.
yes,
It
absolutely,
requires like what I call like an empathy that is for the future.
yeah,
It's like I'm holding on a picture of you
right,
when you get out of here, but it can be very hard on the person who's holding that level of empathy and just being so patient.
yeah. No, I mean, I talk to a lot of families, and friends, but both. And because now, who's getting recruited now are older folks. It's not so much the college kids anymore. So it is people in their 30s and 40s. And because, cults want you to be already having a skill and be able to contribute to the organization, run
Yeah.
their businesses or bring in money or bring in influential people. So for family members or for spouses, whatever, it's just, I always say to them, make sure that you also do self-care, which I hate that term because it's so new agey, but
I know.
like, are you seeing a therapist? Are you getting a massage every couple of weeks? I mean, because after a while, your friends and your relatives don't want to hear about it anymore, right?
Yeah.
And so it gets very difficult.
Yeah.
You can feel so hopeless and helpless.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to start a support group for family members and friends. Um, but
Who can talk about it? You
yeah,
know,
with other family, other people going through the same thing, you know.
I've been noticing that some of the most helpful things, there wasn't anything for me when I left my cult, and I don't think there was anything for you, which is an X group or a leaving group. And I'm seeing that right now there's a group that is really growing called Leaving MAGA or MAGA.
Mm, mhm.
And it's run by a guy, and he's got a really quite a reach, a social media reach. And I was thinking these groups are so healing because they know exactly what you went through. You don't
Right.
have to explain any of the terminology. You don't have to explain, but I think those groups might also be good for people who are trying to support people who are in right now. Like if I'm trying to support my QAnon mega dad or whatever, and just trying to be patient and loving, I think it might be helpful for me to go to a leaving MAGA group, and right and just be able to see what happens,
Yeah,
that people can leave.
that gets really tricky because I mean, I can't speak about the MAGA people because I'm not, you know, not in that world, but
Yeah,
I have not had MAGA, MAGA clients, whatever, but it gets tricky, at least for cult survivors, when you bring in parents or someone who wasn't in a cult,
yeah,
it can disrupt the safe space, you know.
yeah,
So it gets really tricky. That's why
yeah,
sometimes the conferences, um, when there's a cult related conference and you have, you know, academics and you have clinicians and you have families and you have survivors, you can, you know, maybe have dinner with somebody or you can hear people's stories and you can sort of commiserate in that way.
yeah,
But you're right, because people who are not in these situations, you know, most of the time don't have a clue what it feels like.
yeah,
You know,
yeah, yeah. It's very
the
hard.
good and the bad, you know, the good and the bad.
Um, when you think about people who did leave and they were successful in leaving, is there like a connecting thread that you see, or is it just individual? People have their own breaking point with these high control, high demand groups.
Yeah, I think I mean, the way I see it, you know, I have my shelf metaphor, which you've probably heard, but I believe that anybody who's in one of these environments has doubts. I mean, I was the truest of true believers for the longest time, and even I had doubts.
Yeah,
Like you'd see something and go, oh, wait a minute, right? But of course, you have nowhere to express those doubts. You can't say to your friend or your spouse, whatever, don't you think the leader's a little over the top tonight? You know,
yeah,
it's like you would just get slammed. So what I say is that you take all these doubts and questions and you store them on this shelf in the back of your head.
hmm,
And then one day, one too many things happen, and then that shelf breaks. And when that shelf breaks, you kind of have an aha moment. Like you don't necessarily think, oh, this is a cult or this is a damaging group or, you know, this is a, you know, really destructive relationship, but you know something's wrong,
hmm,
right? And then if you're lucky, after once you have this breaking point, you can kind of figure out how to work your way out. And that's going to be different for every person depending on the circumstances. But there was a time when there was sort of a theory that people who join young, when they reach a certain age, they leave because they realize this is like getting to be like the rest of their life now. But I haven't seen that really actually come to fruition. I think it's really random. It's really each individual's breaking point.
hmm.
Um,
I
yeah.
like your idea of having a support group for people on the outside who are
Mhm.
doing so much support. That's, I think, one thing that's big, although it doesn't stop people, is to have someone on the outside.
Mhm.
There's a very strong and very vocal ex-Scientology community.
Oh yeah, the Aftermath Foundation.
Yeah, yeah. Mike Grinder, the late,
Right.
great Mike Grinder, and
Right.
the number of people. So I like that because they're kind of surrounding Scientology. They're very well known within Scientology, right? They're the super suppressive people in
Super
that
suppressive,
terminology.
exactly.
But they have dedicated themselves to being available
Hmm.
if people want to go. And I'm seeing the same with the Leaving MAGA group, is they are dedicating themselves to saying, you can go, you can
Hmm.
go.
Hmm.
One of the problems I'm seeing is I'm following this group on social media, is a number of people come and say, this is why I was in MAGA, and this is what I understood, and I was raised, right-wing Christian, and right. And then people will come on and just attack them and say, well, you should have known. At what point was Trump too much for you, right?
People
Why
in the
did you?
group do that?
No, the people in the comments, right?
Oh, in the comments.
So there's
Oh,
no room for any grace. There's no room for, hey, I did that thing. Right? That was a bad thing I did and I'm gone now. There I think something I'm seeing, especially on the left, and as you saw in your own group, the left is attacking itself, is that there's no welcome from the left. I'm in a group called Braver Angels, and they are dedicated to bringing people together about things we both care about. We all care about immigration. What do you think, right? And the conversations have been very good. It's been very healing to have Braver Angels around, so I can see, okay, you don't have to fight like cats and dogs. You don't have to despise each other. But I think if we don't understand the cultic nature of an authoritarian regime, I don't think we're very, what would you say, useful to each other. If someone were to come to me and say, I finally had enough of Trump. I'm not MAGA anymore. I don't even know if I'm a Republican. I think I would have the knowledge inside me to go, well, what was interesting to you at first? What drew you in? Right? And what stepped you out? I'd want to know instead of saying, well, at what point, like was saying that he was going to grab people by the something not enough for you, or this not enough for you. There's so much punishment
yeah.
going on.
Yeah.
I
And
think it
this is
might keep people in MAGA, just that behavior.
knowing that that's going to happen. Yeah. I mean, I always say, what you want to, if you're the contact person, you want to somehow get across to the person that you're the safe haven. If they want to leave, you're the safe haven.
Yeah.
And again, this is when I was talking about cults, but I think it could apply here as well. I always say, let them come home or whatever, wherever they're going to live, whatever, and just let them decompress.
Yeah.
Right? Don't question them in the beginning. Don't ask them anything. If they want to talk, let them talk. If they don't want to talk, don't make them talk. If they don't want to go to Aunt Bessie's dinner, don't make them go. Like, just let them decompress, because leaving is one of the hardest things you do, because you're leaving behind your whole world.
Yeah.
At that point, it's like everything you ever believed in, your friends, in many cases your family, your children, God knows. So just let them decompress, and then when slowly they'll build back up.
Yeah.
And then but never challenge or criticize. You want to just be so happy that they left.
Yeah.
That should be enough. Like, and that is, I think, what people, yeah, people are just hypercritical. On the other hand, and this is going to depend on each person, but everybody who's in a cult, at least if we're talking about cults,
Hmm.
and probably the MAGA movement, whatever,
Yeah.
everybody becomes a perpetrator, right?
Yeah.
In a sense, you have to, in order to survive, you have to, right? For example, in my group, we spent a lot of time criticizing people, right? We'd sit in a circle and criticize somebody. Well, if you raised your hand and tried to support the person, well, you would get free, and suddenly it would turn on you. Or if you didn't say anything, you'd get called on. Well, what do you think about it, comrade so and so, right? Everybody has to participate in the abuse of other members, right? And
Yeah.
that's part of what keeps you in, because then you have all this shame and guilt. But when you leave, it is important to acknowledge that. Now, the extent of that is going to depend on where the person was in the ranks of things.
Yeah.
Um, but probably even the MAGA people went to some demonstration or helped make posters or posted crappy shit on the internet,
Yeah.
whatever. And so it does take both sides, but I think in the beginning, it's really important to just be gentle and understanding and just let them be if they leave.
They've been through a lot.
They've been through a lot. And
What do you find,
what,
um,
go ahead.
what is a way for people to work with their remorse and make amends? I mean, I think it's individual.
It is individual because it depends what you did. Like, again, in my case, I was in top leadership. I was in the inner circle, so I knew all the shit that happened, and I modeled myself after the top leaders, and so I became number one bitch. I was horrible. I expelled people. I thought of punishments for people. I was awful, and so for me, I mean, when I left, I was suicidal for a long time. I was like, how did I become that person? Like, I don't even deserve to be alive.
Mm.
Once I realized the immoral nature of everything I had done. And so what I did as much as I could is I went back to people that I knew I had hurt and said, I am so sorry. You know, at the time I thought I was doing the right thing, but I know I hurt you. If you don't want to ever forgive me, I understand that. But if you would, that would be wonderful. And I tried to individually make amends. And then I wrote a document to all the other people. Well, my group was unusual because it ended all at once. We finally had our revolution and we overthrew our leader and we all got out. So,
Success.
yes.
Okay.
So at some point I wrote a document that I sent to, this was before the internet, and I just sent this thing to everybody and said, and sort of explained my situation and apologized for who I had become and tried to convey some understanding of that and why I became that person. But it is not easy. None of this stuff is easy, as you know.
Yeah, it's it's a painful thing to be in any kind of abusive relationship and you realize who you became,
Mm-hmm.
in relation to it. Some people are talking about, or when people think about cults, they think about deprogramming. But you and I talked about that a bit. What does the research say about the one of the things with deprogramming is often people would be plucked out of their cult and brought to a second location and imprisoned there while they were deprogrammed. I'm like, that sounded like a good idea to who?
Yeah, that was so that a lot of that was done, I would say, in the 70s and
Mhm.
80s, that you know, some of the more well-known cults, the Unification Church, in particular, the Unification of Church, Scientology, Children of God, they were recruiting, wildly, especially on college campuses and stuff. So it was a lot of young people were getting swept up into these groups. We called it the Jesus movement, and it was, the hippie era, and people were exploring and so parents didn't know what to do, right? Some parents kind of banded together, like parents of they each had a kid in the same group or whatever. And my understanding of the history of this is this guy came along who was a bit of a thug himself and came up with this idea of what we call kidnap deprogramming. And then a few other people started doing it as well. And it was exactly as you described. They would grab people off the street or out of a car or whatever and whisk them away to some cabin in the woods. And I mean, there's stories of women being raped. I mean, there's, that people, sometimes the person had a gun on you. And I mean, it was totally not the thing to do. But I
Yeah.
think desperate parents didn't know what else to do. And I know I have met people who were deprogrammed, quote, deprogrammed in that way, and they're thankful that their parents did that, now that, and of course that's against the law. You can't kidnap people.
Yeah.
So that, that procedure, or whatever we want to call it, evolved into what we called exit counseling. And that's even evolved more since that time. And and now they really are, when interventions are done, they're kind of modeled after the AA, alcoholic interventions, where you
Yeah.
get together the most important family members or whatever, and you get the person to agree to sit down. It's not a trick. And you just all try to talk to them, and you have professional interventionists there who kind of know how to direct it. It's very expensive. Most people can't afford it, and
Yeah.
give up their retirements paying for this stuff. But yeah, the kidnap deprogramming was a big crazy thing. Big crazy thing.
Well, I have to say, getting some kind of post-cult education
Oh,
is
that
really important because,
absolutely.
I mean, you could just read Janja's books, okay? Um, because otherwise, you're still vulnerable.
Yes, exactly. You become what we call a cult hopper.
You
You
just
go
go to the next one or a
right,
cultic relationship.
right.
You know, I
If you don't
saw,
understand, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, go, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, if you don't understand how you got hooked, like what was your vulnerability, right? And being vulnerable is not a sickness. We're all vulnerable,
Yeah.
a million times. I mean, you're vulnerable if it's raining out, if your dog died, if you moved to a new town, you just got divorced, any of those moments, somebody comes along, boom, you're going to say, oh, sure, I'll try that. So it's not a sickness. It's not that you're stupid. That's just how life is. So if you don't understand where you were at that moment, that you went along with that, got duped into it, didn't see the red flags, it can easily happen again.
Yeah. I know after I was kicked out of my cult when I was 17 for asking questions. Don't
Mm,
ask questions in a cult, y'all.
no,
Don't do
right.
it. They're going
No,
to
no.
kick you out. But I
That's one of
went
the
from
red flags.
there. Yeah, I went from there to a very cultic marriage.
No, there you
Um,
go.
that there was something that felt like home. You know, I had been
Right.
in the cult from 10 to 17, so I had some good training in how to be in a cult. And then when I started my own New Age career, which I ended, I knew what I didn't want to do. I knew what I had seen and I wanted to fix it, but I didn't have enough information about the whole structure of the New Age to know what I would find out, a decade or two later is that, yeah, you can't fix this. This is the structure of the New Age is cultic. It's not a cult, but it's
Right,
sure cultic. There's a
right.
lot going on there that is not fixable. It's not addressable. And I thought I was going to fix it, which is me being an idealist,
Mm-hmm.
wanting to be special,
Mm-hmm.
right? Ignoring information that I don't want to see because I've got what, a crusade.
Right.
So those things are good, normal human things, but they can be so easily turned against us.
And then what was your awakening that time?
I realized how much damage I was doing. It was very much feeling remorseful and ashamed of having been a part of, for me, telling people that to be hyper empathic is somehow a psychic skill. So there's still the people out there who are the empaths, and I'm one of the proto empaths. I'm one of the first people who brought that. So I apologize sincerely. And my future career from that moment was trying to fix what I had done. Right?
Yeah.
People don't want to hear it.
My favorite, my favorite memory of you is when I was teaching and you came to my class at Chico State and you adjusted my aura in front of the class. Do you remember that? I sat in the chair and there was Carla behind me adjusting my aura
It
for
was
these
so
40
good.
students. It was just brilliant. I loved it.
It was so good. But I mean, it had so much meaning. And a part of what I did after that was try to figure out, okay, there weren't auras, there's no such thing as a psychic empath, there's not dead people, there's not this, there's not chakras. So what was it? What was it that I saw? What was it that we were all responding to instead of just turning into some kind of a jerk skeptic? That community where it's all just nothing, but there's something there. So yeah, that I think one of the important things for me coming out of a cult was figuring out what had happened.
Mm-hmm.
Like how could I have been that vulnerable
Mm-hmm.
that many times
Mm-hmm.
and not seen what other people on the outside could easily see?
Mm-hmm.
What was going on with me and what was going on in the new age and what are we doing, right? It can be a learning experience.
Oh yeah, that's why. I mean, I'm very Well, I'm a fiend about people writing, and so when I work with people, I give them a lot of assignments, and I have a lot of handouts and things that I've used in my courses, where because for me, like, and I got this from my own experience when I left my cult, or when the cult exploded, it was 1986, and I moved to New York, and I tried to figure out what the hell had happened to me, and anything, any books that I found, anything at that time, it was all about religious cults. And I was like,
Mm.
well, I guess we weren't a cult, because only religions are cults, right?
Yeah.
All cults are religious. But then I started to make these parallels. So I took these sheets of paper and I put down, okay, well, they have Jesus and we had Karl Marx, and they have the Bible and we had the training of the cadre, and they have this and we have, and I had this long list where everything matched. And I thought, fuck it, we were a cult. We were a political cult. And I was like the first person to even start talking about other kinds of cults besides religious cults.
Yeah.
And of course, now we have everything. I always say there's probably a chocolate chip cookie cult out there if that's
I'm
what you're
going to
interested
it.
in. Yeah.
I've got that kind of idealism.
But writing is so important, writing it out. Like, what were the beliefs? Are those still your beliefs? What got you to think those were, I just chart it all out, chart it all out.
Yeah.
I also did like a whole timeline from the beginning, as much as I could remember, at least month by month. What was I doing? What happened to me? And what was the cult doing? And then I saw, oh, that's the reason I got punished that time, was because this and this had just happened. Oh, that's why, and you can make sense of it, because when you get out, it's such a jumble. It's
Yeah.
just like your brain is just muddled.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like that. I was thinking of your PhD dissertation, which became the Bounded Choice book,
Hmm.
and how you made comparisons between your political cult and the Bo Peep cult, which people know as
Heaven's Gate.
Heaven's Gate, um, and how you were making like direct correlations
Right.
between this UFO cult, where it turned out very, very badly for everyone, and your political cult. And then, I don't know, in your book, did you bring in Enron, or it had happened after Bounded Choice?
Enron happened after that, but
Okay,
yeah,
yeah,
but that's the work. The work by Dennis Turish on Enron is really good.
yeah,
Tourish. But yeah, I love those charts at the end of Bounded Choice. I mean, that's like that can be a model for what people can do, because you couldn't imagine two more different cults than my
yeah,
political cult that's going to save the people, and Heaven's Gate, where all they wanted to do was get away from the people, get away from Earth, right? Like, oh, but then you looked at it, it was like, oh, it's all the same. They just call it something else,
yeah, yeah. And it's really helped me as I'm looking at the whole, MAGA and QAnon and the Trump authoritarian stuff, to be able to say it's not a cult, but it's cultic, and here's where.
Hmm. Hmm.
To use those four dimensions of cultic
Hmm.
control. That's been so helpful. It's been helpful when I've gone into singing groups. Do you know what I mean? Okay, that's cultic. And I've made a whole career, and leading people and writing books, with trying not to be cultic, because it's very easy
Right,
in the work that I'm doing to become a cult leader. People don't even see it happening to
right,
themselves.
right.
And they become super inflated and super self-absorbed, and I'm like, this isn't good. You could read
Right.
a book about this.
Well, I think the other thing that's really helpful is in Escaping Utopia, at the end of each chapter, we did these checklists, which I primarily you did, I must say, of, what's a good organization, what's a bad organization, and sort of a checklist that people can look at. Is your organization doing this? Is your organization doing that? Or your relationship or whatever? And very straightforward ways for people to like assess and analyze what they're in.
Yeah, I really like that. I think that was my idea, because one of your points is that a cult is just a social group.
Hmm.
It's not some weird thing from another planet. It is a
Right,
human social behavior. And if you don't understand what's happening, you're
right,
going to be vulnerable the next time.
right,
So to have these, like, this is actually a healthy form of
right,
social control. This
right.
is an unhealthy form. That
Right.
I like that very much. Thank you, Carla from the past. It was a good idea.
They were a pretty good team, I must say.
I think so. We
Yeah.
should write something about what's happening now.
Well, yeah. See
But
if we
maybe not with an
get put in
academic
jail.
publisher. No
Yeah. Oh,
academic
yeah.
publisher. Those
Yeah.
guys.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I want to thank you for being here. It's good
Oh,
to talk to you again, but also, is there anything that you wanted to say that I didn't get anywhere near?
I don't think so. I think the other one of the things I do always want to stress is about charisma.
Yes.
Because I think people get really confused about that.
Okay,
And so if you don't mind, I'll explain that before we end.
definitely.
Yeah, so everybody has this idea, this sort of misunderstanding that charisma is a trait inherent in someone, like, right? Like that person is really charismatic, and because of the way they dress and smile and laugh and whatever. And so JFK was really charismatic, and whatever, actors,
Obama.
actors, Obama for sure, right?
Yeah.
The reality is that, and Max Weber, who was one of the quote fathers of sociology back in the 1800s, was the first person to write about charisma. Charisma is actually a social relationship. And so what I mean by that is that you are the person that attributes charisma to someone else, right? So you are the person who thinks Obama is charismatic, whereas someone else might think, oh, he's just some punky black guy, right? So it's not universal, right? And so, but once you attribute charisma to someone, you basically are saying that they're special, that they're better than you, that they have these certain traits. Once you do that, you have created a relationship that has an imbalance of power. That
Yes.
person now has power over you. And so that's what happens in the cultic situation. Everybody's like, oh, the cult leader's charismatic, the cult leader's charismatic. And when you first join, they're all convincing you how charismatic the cult leader is. My cult leader was a drunken slob. I mean, she was not charismatic. But I remember when I first met her, I was so primed to go, wow, she's so smart. And oh, she can lecture all about world events. And I realized she was lecturing sociology 101, right? So, but we get bamboozled by that. So I think by understanding what exactly charisma is and sort of demystifying it, I think also helps us understand and see the red flags and keep us out of some kind of situation that could be harmful.
I also think, charisma is definitely in the eye of the beholder because we can
Exactly.
look at groups and go, who would fall for that?
Exactly.
That guy is weird. He's
Exactly.
not, who would vote for that? That's not even a thing.
Right.
But it's not like we are hip to charisma because we'll go attach to somebody else.
Hmm.
Yeah. I'm also thinking I'm on Instagram and it's just such a toxic place. It's so toxic. Well, so is Facebook. But a lot of people, influencers, are trying to they're trying to grab you. They're trying to build charisma.
Hmm.
And I think that's not very good for the influencer at all, or the
Hmm.
person trying to do it. I notice that people start to lose their humanity as soon as they become very popular.
Hmm.
It's not a
Hmm.
good thing to be in any kind of a hierarchy of human worth.
Yeah. No,
That you're,
we've seen it over and over.
it's bad for people
I
to
mean,
be,
yeah. I mean, the news just came out about Cesar Chavez. Who would have thought, right? So,
that was so awful.
yeah. So, the heroes often end up not being heroes at all.
Yeah, they're just people carrying around a lot of somebody else's charisma
Hmm.
projections. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. So how about if we don't do that to anybody else ever? Why
Wouldn't
don't we
that be
just treat
nice?
everybody as if they're human beings?
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah. And don't make them into, yeah, don't make them into little gods. That's not
Yeah,
good for people.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the other thing that people get tricked by is that, and I've had this come up a lot when I meet with people, is they'll say, but when I was with the leader, I had this experience of, I left my body and the stars were shining and, whatever. I had this incredible experience that only the cult leader could bring about because he was doing this on my forehead or, licking my breast or whatever. And the reality, and I always say to people, you know what? You could take LSD and have the very same experience, and the cult leader doesn't have to be anywhere around. And so you have to recognize, like, what are the I call high arousal techniques that they're using to get you to that space where you think you attribute it to that person rather than these are just emotional and sensory responses.
Yeah. Yeah.
We could
It's
talk
so
about this
much.
forever, Carla.
I know. I know. It's so much. It's so much. But thank you for being with me today. It's really
Oh,
good to talk to you again.
yeah, it's great to see you again. I'm sorry it took so long to get me nailed down.
Well, you're flying around a lot. Thank you so
So,
much.
yeah, hopefully I'll see you in April.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
cool.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.